because that's important. So I'm Danny Bignell, Program Manager at Big Ideas Program, and to my right is Philip Denny, the Program Director of Big Ideas. So we are here to answer all your questions about the writing workshop, and in addition, can I actually get a show of hands of people that might want advising afterwards on their idea? Great. We're more than welcome to stay after the event to just do some informal advising on your idea. And in addition, we have a special guest tonight. So Scott Shigioka, it comes from Open IDEO. Has anyone heard of IDEO? Okay, cool. I'm seeing a few hands here. So IDEO is a design company, and one of the great things that they do is they do storytelling. And so Open IDEO is taking IDEO's message on the road globally. So he's an expert storyteller, and he's going to give you guys some really great tips on how to tell your story in your pre-proposal. In addition, I want to give a shout out to our remote audience. Hello. We are participating on all the UC campuses, and we have 2 international partners, Hebrew University and McCrary University. So if anyone in the remote audience has a question, please email us at bigideas@berkeley.edu with the subject line writing workshop question, and we will have somebody in the back, Francis Gonzalez, our network manager, will make sure that that question gets answered. So really quickly, I just wanted to give you a brief agenda. We're going to go over a few of the reminders of the application process. We'll talk about the requirement overview. We're going to do a little walkthrough of the application itself. Go over a previous example of a pre-proposal, talk about its strengths, weaknesses. This is where you guys come in and you can kind of use your own skills. We'll make it interactive. And then we're going to end with Scott coming in and giving you an expert overview on how to tell your story. So let us begin. Haha. Now, many of you have asked before about the numbers of last year. Last year, we had 300 applicants. 70 moved on to the second stage of the program. So that's the full proposal stage. And we had 43 winning teams. We also, oops, so sorry about that. This thing is going haywire on me. Okay, yeah. There we go. Today's been one of those days. So here are the categories. You all might be familiar with them.
We get a show of hands as we go through them. I'm just curious, I want to sort of sense where the interest is here.
Yeah, so we have art and social change. Anyone thinking about applying under that? Okay, great. Connected communities. Wonderful. Energy, resource, and alternatives.
Yeah, maybe over there.
Global health. Great. Hardware for good. Wonderful. Workforce, education, and development. Great. And then do we have any returning Big Ideas winners that would be applying for scaling up? Okay, that's fine. And I did get food systems. So food systems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other food systems?
Sorry about that. I did see a few hands that were kind of like halfway raised. If you guys want clarification on which category is the best fit for you after this workshop, please feel free to come talk to us. Hopefully we'll make it a little bit clearer now, but we have plenty of opportunities to help you out with that. And once again, the requirements is that the team lead be a full-time matriculated student at one of the UCs, including Berkeley, but you are able to have team members be non-students. The project is student-initiated and student-led, and 1 submission per category. Do I have a question in the back?
1 submission per idea, per unique idea. You can have multiple submissions to a category if they're all unique ideas.
Correct. Yes.
I have a question about the team lead. If they're graduating this semester, but we're applying this semester, are they still eligible to be a team lead?
Yes.
As long as you're a matriculated student this semester, you're good to go. You
Yeah.
can still compete even after you graduate this semester.
Thank you.
Mhm. So, really quickly, that question was just if you graduate in December, are you still eligible? The answer is yes. Okay, so we have about 2 weeks left. We're in crunch time. You guys are at the writing workshop, which is great. But in addition, we are going to have 2 events that you guys can highly benefit from. The next one is on November 7th, and that's the Industry Advising Clinic. If you are on our mailing list or are following our social media, we have put out some information about this. If you have not received any information about the Industry Advising Clinic, please sign up over there at the front of the room. It is an opportunity for you to get advice from an industry expert. So when you click on the link, you will actually be taken to a form that has individuals with a little summary of their bio, and you can actually click to meet with them for 30 minutes. So you can do that in person, or you can also have an option to do that remotely. And then our last call is the editing blitz. So November 14th is the deadline. We do have a holiday in the midst of that, but the days right before the deadline, we are gonna do editing. You guys can come in. We can also do remote advising and just make sure your pre-proposals are polished up and ready to go.
Yeah, this is just a last final opportunity to get some feedback, some guidance on your pre-proposal. We'll help you identify where are the gaps where you need to focus in the last 48, 36 hours. So you can go back and revise the kind of details, feedback you get.
And just to quickly note that we also have resources online. If you go to bigideascontest.org//rules, everything we're gonna say now is gonna be on the website. In addition, we're gonna have the pre-proposal example that we go through with 2 other examples, and all of your questions should be answered there. If not, you can always reach out to us.
Just to give you some examples of who's gonna be at the Industry Advising Clinic, we have somebody who's a director of content marketing and digital strategy for Institute for the Future. We have somebody from Food System 6. We have somebody who's a SPZ legal that does legal formation, IP strategy for startups. We have somebody from Facebook Social Good, so we'll have partnerships. So a ton of great individuals, and you get the opportunity to one-on-one to get that in your pre-proposal.
Great, thank you, Philip.
And it's available to students remotely as well. So if you're not on the Berkeley campus and you want to do a remote advising session, you can do that as well.
Absolutely, remote advising is always an option. So just putting this first and foremost, the deadline is November 14th at 12 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. I would recommend trying to create a draft of your application now and just testing it out, but we are gonna go through all of that, but just making sure that's extra super clear. So let's talk a little bit about the judging criteria. As you can see, the majority of the judging criteria is based on your innovation. The next is your potential for impact. We have viability, so is your idea able to actually make an impact on a population scale? Is it sustainable? Quality and category. So we're gonna go over the quality and innovation and all these judging criteria right now, actually. Yes?
Just a quick question. So if yours is more on the technical scale and has a bioengineering background to it, how much of that would you want to see in the pre-proposal, technicality-wise for viability purposes?
So I would say in the pre-proposal, your real estate is 3 pages. So
And your proposed innovation is a page to maybe a page and a half.
yeah, you definitely want to show that you've done your research, but I would say in general, you're writing to a more generalist audience. So somebody is going to have a general background related to your category, but you want to make sure you're using terms that we could all basically understand, and nobody's going to fault you for not having extra set of pages because the 3 page is pretty strict. And so we can work with you on that to make sure that if you need to dwindle it down or just make it a little tighter, that it can fit. And we'll talk about an example that had some technical elements that was able to do that. Yes.
With the 40% innovation, is that innovation, like, is that how much they like your idea, or is it how original your idea is, or some combination?
That's a really good question. So is that innovation means how much the judges like your idea, or how novel or unique is your idea? I would say how novel or unique is your idea, and are you trying to solve a problem in a unique way? So in our last writing workshop, we talked about the competitive landscape analysis, where you're able to talk about other people, places, things that are doing something similar to your innovation. But if you talk about building on that or filling some of the gaps that those competitors have, that's going to be unique. That is going to be novel, and judges are going to look for that. Do you have anything to add?
And we sort of, our understanding of innovation is very, very broad. So that it doesn't, I mean, when folks think of innovation, they think of the latest great widget. We're talking services, we're talking programs, we're talking technologies, products being deployed in an innovative way, replicating those services in another region that doesn't have those services currently. That's all innovation. So there's a very broad framework for innovation throughout the competition.
Yes, thank you. And yes.
If you have a working prototype, should we like incorporate some features or maybe incorporate?
Very good question. So that was, if you have a working prototype, should you incorporate some pictures? Yes, you can. And if you feel like pictures can describe your prototype better than actually writing it down, you might be saving a lot of space. And so we'll go through an example where we feel like they've done that well in some ways, but we can also talk with you to make sure that that's placed correctly and still explains your innovation. But
especially for highly technical projects, I think it's a really good idea often, because you can show more in that amount of real estate than you could convey words. And for somebody like me, who's much more of a visual person, I can more quickly grasp the technical aspects of your product if I can see it.
any other questions before I move on? Okay, and I love just the raising of the hands. When you guys have a question, just let me know. Great, so let's actually talk about this application. Now, when you go to bigideascontest.org, I'm going to show you how you would actually start your application, and you can save it as a draft. So there's no harm in starting your application now, saving it, and working on it as you go. So I am at bigideascontest.org, and I would like to compete. So I'm going to go to categories. Gonna do that. And on the left, we have all of the categories that we mentioned. And for the purpose of this demo, I'm gonna choose food systems, because I forgot it before.
Or you can also, if you scroll down the page, you can also see a quick description of each of the categories as well.
Yes. Exactly. So you can click here, or you can click on the icons up here. So if I would like to apply for food systems, that's where I'm gonna start. We have a little inspirational video, and as we mentioned before, all of the categories have overviews and examples. So if you have a question about category fit, I would start there and then ask us in addition. Once I go to apply now, it's going to take me to the actual application portal. And then from there, I'm gonna put in my email address. This was and now we have reached the application. So I would say the application takes about 20 minutes from start to finish. Not only are you going to be uploading your 3-page PDF, but we do have some questions about your team members, and we also have a feedback survey. So what I really love about Big Ideas is we're very iterative. Your feedback is really crucial to help us figure out what we're doing right, what we can work on, and how we can innovate so that we can better serve students in the future. So please.
And yeah, I encourage you, as Danny already did, to get on the website, get on this platform, start filling in your information and save it. Because it is 20 to 25 minutes to do this. And every year, teams will get on at 11:55, and we have 300 people climbing on the website. It's been unstable at times, so get it done early, then go back and look at it and review it. I've often gotten calls from teams after the deadline that they were 3 or 4 minutes late, and I have to decide whether I'm going to be that stickler. And as I get older, I become more of a stickler. So, and I'm in my 10th year of doing this. So get it done early and get it done on time.
Yes, get it done early, get it done on time, and come to us if you have any questions. So all the questions are required, so the application will let you know if you have missed something and you will not be able to submit it. The team information is reflexive based on how many team members you have. If you have more than 8 team members and all of those team members are students, please let us know, because we haven't seen that in the past, and right now we just have capability for up to 8, but there is no restriction on team size. In addition, just to let you know that for this part of the application, we are only collecting information on team members that are students. So your team bio in your 3-page pre-proposal can include students and non-students, but for this application, we're just collecting data on the team members that are students. Does that make sense to everyone? I know it was a little confusing for me. Okay, cool. And then you can click, got a few pages. I'll take you to the next page where we can show you. You've got your pre-proposal project name. We have the 50-word kind of elevator pitch. This is in addition to your 3-page proposal. And so this information you can fill in. It's really helpful for you to stay on message and practice how to tell your message in 50 words or less, and then 150 words or less. So there's 2 boxes for you to put both of those. And then you also have another box to kind of just tell us about any other awards that you've won. This is where you will actually be uploading your pre-proposal. You might see here that if you want to consent to public dissemination of your pre-proposal, if you select yes, essentially you're saying that in future years, if we like your pre-proposal and we want to take any identifying information from your name, we could use it to help teach other students. But there's no harm, no foul if you don't want to share that information, so you would just click no on that section.
But what's important to know is that the information, that 50-word summary, that 150-word summary, whatever information you put into those will be public information. But the full proposal upload, we can keep that confidential, keep that private if you want to protect your IP, protect your intellectual property. So if you have something that you want to protect, don't put it in the 50-word and 150-word summary, put it in the full proposal, and then click that box to acknowledge that you do not want your proposal disseminated. Make sense?
And by public, that means within the judging community and internally. That doesn't mean externally to the rest of the world. So yes, you will upload your PDF 3-page pre-proposal there, and then the final page is actually just our feedback survey. So I'm gonna move, and that has a few questions. So just scrolling very quickly down so that you really understand you wanna put some time and effort into this application process. Okay, do we have any questions on the application process?
Some of the frequently asked questions are, can I change my team formation between the pre-proposal and the full proposal round? And yes, you can. So if your team changes in the full proposal round and you're accepted into the full proposal round, then you just would redo that web form with different names. You can also change your pre-proposal name between the first round and the second round. So both of those are good. Those are questions we get commonly.
Yeah, just to build on what Philip was saying, we're an early stage innovation contest, so we are cognizant of the fact that things change. So the rules, how many times have I said 3 pages comes out to about 1,600 words, but we're really just stick on that, we're sticklers on that 3-page limit. However, the formatting and the outline is flexible. We're gonna go through an example We talked about the judging criteria and and we will talk about the different elements that should be included for it to be a great pre-proposal, and this is from our experience working with judges before. But you guys are the experts of your project, so if you have a way that you really want to tell your story and you think you've included all those elements, by all means, go for it. In addition, a timeline and a budget is not required in the pre-proposal. So what I have kind of been telling students is this is really your opportunity to tell a captivating, engaging story about your innovation so the judges feel like, wow, I really want to see, or I want to push them to the next stage. The next stage is when we're going to get a little down and dirty with an implementation plan, a budget, but for the purposes of this pre-proposal, it's not necessary. However, if that is a crucial part of your innovation and you're able to say it concisely, by all means, you can include that, but not a requirement. Now, the last point I want to make, because I think I said PDF like a million times, is that there's no appendices. So references, citations, that is not included in the 3-page limit. So you have 3 pages of content. That 4th page can be a reference page that references all your citations, but you can't have appendices that reflect back on certain parts of your innovation. You have to remember that we have judges that are going to be reading on average 7 to 8 pre-proposals, and so we also want to keep them captivated and engaged in your storyline, and so the longer that you go, we find that it just becomes a little too difficult. Do we have any questions on that part? Yes?
For technical projects, how necessary is it to have a references section?
For technical projects, how necessary is it to have a references section? I don't know if I would be able to answer that question without looking at your particular project. I would say that having statistics and research included in either your problem statement or in some part is really helpful. So I would want to reference where I got that information. But if you want to talk later about why you're thinking along those lines, we can definitely look at your project in particular. Did I miss anything there?
Yeah, as Danny said, most of the references that we see fall from the problem statements because you're documenting relevant research and statistics to document the problem. But yeah, in the proposed innovations, you describe the technical nature of innovation for relevance, but we can talk about that more.
Great. Any other questions before I move along? How we feeling? I know, it's just like the energy. It's great, yeah. Have some more pizza, have some water. Let's get into the nitty-gritty stuff. Been talking about this pre-proposal. Let's talk about the actual elements. So you have the problem statement, which in general we found is about 1 or a half to a full page. Like we said, the format is flexible, but this is essentially talking about your connection between the problem. You want to showcase your knowledge of the problem, use a mix of qualitative, quantitative research to really highlight that you understand your problem, and you don't want to necessarily make your approach too overly emotional. You want to back it up with numbers. If you have a personal connection to your innovation, by all means state that, but you also want to show that it's viable so that it's actually going to impact a broader community aside from that personal connection that you have. In addition, I would say that a piece of advice I have is you don't want to use statistics that might be related to the problem at hand, but not completely. So an example that we have is if your innovation is a water filter, country poverty rates might be relevant, but it might actually be better to give numbers about the percentage of folks in rural communities that don't have access to treated water. Does that make sense in terms of how to kind of target your statistics to your innovation? I'm seeing some like, yeah, no, maybe. Okay. Now, do we have any other questions about the problem statement before I move on?
Yeah, the personal anecdotes are really there to connect you with the issue, but not overly sentimental, as Danny said. It's really to show
Indeed. Okay, so moving right along, we have the second section. Now this, we're doing them in, from problem statement to landscape analysis, but as I mentioned before, it does not have to be in this order. What I've recommended for students that are having challenges writing their pre-proposal is use these headers as a template and start filling them in the top, second, third, fourth section. And then after we have our guest speaker talk, you might find some ways that you can actually change that format around. But right now, we are talking about the landscape analysis. We do have our last writing workshop on October 10th, which is recorded and available at bigideascontest.org/workshops. If you scroll to the bottom, we actually spent a significant amount of time talking about the different elements included in a great landscape analysis. So what does that mean? It essentially talks about who else is out there trying to do what you've done. This can be in the past, this could be in the present. Competitors are not always bad. So I would recommend not talking smack about them or talking about them in a negative way. Highlighting some possible weaknesses or gaps in their innovation that you want to build on is fine. But these people, places, companies, organizations could be potential key players or partners in the future. So I would just recommend trying to keep an open mind when you're describing your landscape analysis. Yes, in the back.
If you have existing partnerships with foundations or things like that to be a goal, where would we include that in this?
Great question. So the question was, if we have an existing partner that we're already working with, where would we include that? I would say that that can be included in the landscape analysis portion, but as we go through the other sections, you might find an opportunity where it might make sense to put that. So I'm going to hold tight on
I would also say it fits in well to the proposed innovation section to say we intend to implement this project in partnership with X Foundation. So if you go, I see it mostly either in the proposed innovation section, because as you talk about your innovation and how you're going to begin to build, you can talk about building through those partnerships. I also see it sometimes in the bio section where you list out the team members and the partners below the team members. That's a typical way, but not, it's your story to tell.
So now we get to the heart of it, your proposed innovation. You want to state your goals and your objectives. So a goal could be reducing poverty in the Bay Area, and the objective could be creating a 1-year training program that has resume building skills. So there is a clear need to try and have an overall reaching goal, but when you have that objective, you're really drawing the reader into understanding that you understand the problem, and your innovation directly targets a part of the population in a unique way. Yes?
How important do you think it should be to state like measurable effects, like 20% increase of blah, 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 blah?
How important is it to state measurable effects in the proposed innovation?
As a goal.
As a goal. I'm gonna let
Yeah, I
Philip
can
take it
hit
first.
that one. So that comes more into play, quite frankly, in the final round, because we do have so many, well, not any, but impact metrics in the final round. In this, I think you're giving more of the high-level objectives. If you can quantify them to some degree, that's great. But you're giving, the goals are the high-level objectives, and the objectives are really how you're going to execute on this.
Do you have any other questions about that? So also something that I've told students is when you give a summary of kind of the nuts and bolts of your project, you want to talk about maybe like a 1-year implementation plan. This can be a goal. By all means, things change. Reality affects us in a lot of different ways. But if I were able to give you, let's say, $5,000 right now, what would you like to do in a year's time to really get your innovation off the ground? This is what the judges want to know, those concrete steps and actions that you will take. This is also an opportunity for you to talk about your challenges, which I think is really unique to big ideas. In other business competitions, they kind of want you to appear as this polished, shiny project that has already overcome all your obstacles, but we're an early stage innovation contest, so we understand that you have not figured it all out. We want to know that you understand your own obstacles and can also propose some solutions to get through that. So you're more than welcome to talk about the current stage that you are in and use that time to kind of communicate to your judge that you, as long as you have the resources and the mentorship, you can move past those challenges or obstacles.
Yep, the two things that judges flag most often across all big ideas proposals, number one is competitors that you haven't identified already, so somebody else who might be working in the similar market that you're working in. And number two, challenges that you may encounter and not having a solution to those obvious challenges you're going to encounter. Landscape analysis and the challenges sections, if you have those, that's really important to acknowledge. The other thing with the landscape analysis that is a big red flag for judges is when you say there are no competitors in this currently for this innovation that I'm proposing. That immediately, to me and to other judges, the question is, well, why? Is there not a market for it? Is there a problem with that type of innovation? What is, what are the solutions? So really challenge yourself to think both about the challenges and the landscape analysis really seriously, because those are two key areas judges often call out.
Yeah, great point. When somebody says, I don't have any competitors, I say, yes, you do, and that's not a bad thing. That's great. So you want to show that you've done your research in that way. And then just to reiterate your question in the back about partnerships, this is also an opportunity for you to talk about a proposed or current partnership. I have mentioned to students that if there is a key player that you think would really help move your innovation forward, you can call them out as a key partner that you would like. So Francis Gonzalez in the back, he manages our network of judges and mentors. It is in the high hundreds, and so if there is somebody that you would really like to work with, there's a pretty good chance we could probably get you in touch with either somebody that knows somebody or somebody that's related to actually who you want to work with specifically. So you're allowed to say, I would really love to work with this organization. I haven't, I'm at this stage. And we can say, okay, that's great that they recognize that, and we can actually get them in touch with someone to move them along. The final section that we're going to talk about is the team bios. And so the team bios is going to work a little bit differently than you would assume. And so the team bio is really an opportunity for you to describe both the soft and hard skill sets that you have that are related to the innovation. You don't have to include a whole bio. This isn't an opportunity for you to kind of list your CV. You're also able to talk about skills that are not necessarily related to what you're studying. So, for example, what I've told students is, if your project is geographically based in a place and you are from that country, that city, that place, it might help to have that on your team bio because the judge can know they chose that place because they're from there, they have an intimate relationship with that place. But if your other team members are from some place that's completely different, there's not necessarily a need for them to put that type of information. But it doesn't just have to be your hard skill sets that you've learned within university time. We all have hobbies. Those build to us as a holistic person. So include what you think would be relevant to the innovation that you are creating. And that helps give the judges information that, once again, you're the expert of this project, you know how to best solve this problem, your innovation is really well-rounded. Anything else? Okay. Well, I've done a lot of talking, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give all of you an opportunity to actually look at a pre-proposal from the past. Now, what we did in the beginning is we handed out some examples of Pika Pen. Can I just get a show of hands of anyone that does not have a pre-proposal example? Awesome. So Philip and Francis are going to pass them out. For our remote users, if you go to bigideascontest.com/rules, click on the pre-proposal example number 1, and you will also have access to the Pika Pen example. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna give you about 5 minutes to quickly review and look at this pre-proposal. And then we're gonna have an opportunity for you guys to judge this pre-proposal. You can talk about the strengths. You can also talk about the weaknesses. And we're hoping that this gives you a little bit more information and inspiration on how you can draw your own pre-proposal. Okay, so I'm gonna let you guys work away for the next 5 minutes.
And then after that, we have Scott here to go over the storytelling component. So, yeah.
I'm just grabbing a pre-proposal. Hi, I'll introduce yourself in a second after you're done.
The last thing is the.
No, stop. How's everybody doing? Do we need a few more minutes? Still reading? Okay, let's go.
Let's do this. Oh, surprise! If you guys raise your hand, you get a bag. This bag is reusable and can be used for many things. Sky's the limit. Yes, thank you. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we are going to focus on the strengths and weaknesses of this pre-proposal. Now, I'm gonna have it open-ended, so if anyone wants to raise their hand with either a strength or a weakness, for a bag? Oh, yes, in the back. I love your enthusiasm.
Well, the first thing I noticed is the structure of it. And I would say that's a strength because it kind of just helps. They put the problem statement, the landscape, and the summary all together. It kind of helps with the flow of the proposal, which is nice.
Lovely. Oh, he's writing it up. Awesome.
My bad handwriting.
The structure and flow, I think it's great. Yeah, that's definitely a strength.
I agree that the structure is very important, but we can also see that there are images and you can see the design of the pen, and I think that images can speak more than words.
Yeah, great use of images to describe their innovation. We had a question earlier about using photos or graphics, and you can see that they were able to use their real estate very wisely. Yes.
It's also nice that they speak about competition or potential competition, and they really clearly explain what are the strengths and the weaknesses of this competition, even if you're not a professional in the pen area.
Wonderful. So just to reiterate, the writers clearly explain their competitive landscape analysis. They talk about their competitors. And so the audience knows that they've done their research and they know who's out there. Now, oh, I love this raise of hands.
I like how they have a little paragraph in here on how they tested the prototype and kind of mentioned how it's, worked in the applicability of the actual project information.
Wonderful. So they had an opportunity to test their prototype and they talked about those results. By no means you have had to be at this stage. We want you to be honest in this section, but if you have done some testing in the field, please let us know. So
So another aspect is they're pretty practical about what are their next steps going to be. As soon as if they win the big ideas competition, this is the next step that we will be doing. That's tangible and that's pretty. It sounds practical.
mm-hmm. Yeah, describing those next steps in a clear way is great. Yes.
I like how they've branded different parts of their technology, like this flexi sensor. It seems more marketable. It's attractive.
Yeah, so they demonstrate viability, I'd say. Yes, we'll go over here. I love these reason pins.
They showed in the bio, which is really connected to the project, in the bio.
So I like this. In the bio, they're showing the skills relevant to the innovation. I'm seeing a ton of strengths up here. We can keep going, but if anyone wants to talk about the weeknesses, there's no pre-proposal is perfect. Yeah.
It's that they are really working with learners with occupational therapies. So it's not just an idea, they show that they have been working with. So they are basing the research on something practical.
Wonderful. And then did I see?
Yes.
So I want to know which category does this belongs to. I kind of have to, fit. Is it going to be art and social change or?
So this project actually came through a category we had previously called IT for Society. So it fit into the IT for Society. Probably now it could fit into art and social change potentially, but it could also fit into maybe global health, I don't know. But or for Harbor, yeah. Harbor for Good is a fair one, yeah. Harbor.
Yeah, so the past 2 years, the categories haven't changed, but based on all of our student feedback from previous years, we try and make the categories reflective of the proposals. So hopefully that answers your question. Moving right along.
Weakness feels nitpicky, but I feel like it was a little overly technical and a little bit less focused on the need or the narration, compelling. So
yeah, that's not nitpicky at all. That's totally great criticism. We mentioned before, you want to know your innovation, but if you're writing in too technical of a way, that might intimidate judges a little bit. You want to write to a more generalist audience, and also, if you're looking to continue this project, speaking to very diverse partners will have to force you to be very concise and clear in your language. So if there's moments where you're getting really technical, that might actually not be the best solution. So I think that's great.
With this particular proposal, I totally agree that it's overly technical throughout much of it. The one like aha moment I remember I had when I read this was when they describe it in comparison to the Nintendo Wii. I think it's at the bottom of the first page. And I was like, okay, I actually get this now. So being able to use that type of imagery and making connections to something that's more relevant if you have a technical project is really useful. That was really good in that project.
Yeah, but also topical examples, assuming that everyone knows what a Nintendo Wii is. You gotta be careful with that. Do I see somebody over here? Okay, so we have, oh, yes.
I was just gonna add on to that I think it's good how they have us statistics. And so we know that they have done their research, they have knowledge of the space. But I think in talking about problem statements, the passion for the space or the enthusiasm that they have doesn't shine through as much. And at the end, when they talk about team biographies, I think it's the latter part of each of the titles is good that they show diversity in their roles. But at the same time, like looking at the team, it seems like they all are coming from a more technical mechanical engineering background. So there is diversity, but kind of like encased in less diversity.
That is a really, really good point. And so the team bios, it definitely highlights their strengths, but there's not really an opportunity to show those really diverse strengths before I mention those soft skills. If one of the team members had a personal connection with autism, volunteered, had family members, that might kind of build a little bit of emotional connection to that actual innovation. Whereas they could be using some of that space to highlight other skills that team members have instead of just listing all of those kind of hard skills that they have. So this looks like a really good list. Do we have any like burning? Yes.
So we before this we went through different sections and I wasn't able to find any section in this entire proposal. I mean this entire piece. Although the heading is problem description and project summary. And yes, it is coherent and I can make out what the paragraph is about. But to signal that what this paragraph is going to talk, I don't see any headers.
Okay, that's a good point. That can be a weakness in terms of not really knowing which part, if you're not really clear about segueing from your problem statement to your competitive landscape analysis or to your proposed innovation and your judge is kind of looking, having a header there can be really, really helpful. But also you guys are the experts, so if you're able to really clearly and concisely tell your story without the need of headers, then by all means.
Yeah, just to emphasize, we talked about the 4 elements you have to have in your pre-proposal, the landscape analysis, the problem statement, the proposed innovation, and the bios. But it doesn't have to be rigidly structured into those 4 elements. It's your story to tell. You have to develop that compelling narrative. That's what we'll talk a little bit about tonight. But those elements do have to be able to be called out somewhere. So sometimes having headers in places makes sense. But if you want to sort of intertwine some of those aspects, we can do that too.
Great. Okay, we'll have 2 more comments. I'm loving this, though. You guys are awesome.
I was just going to second the technical thing or the lack of passion, but just maybe a story of a particular person who was having issues with their handwriting or felt like they were lacking some confidence. Because I was looking back to this and it looked like they actually, are talking to some, occupational therapists. But I found myself asking when I read the first paragraph, I was like, really, handwriting is necessary for self-confidence? And then I was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess so.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, is that are there any strong research or statistics that are pointing to this need, this direct connection between autism and handwriting skills? If that's not really clearly called out, then a judge might, move past that pre-proposal. But, as we pointed out, there are many strengths and weaknesses.
And it comes into play more in the final round where you have more real estate, and especially for projects that have sort of an IT web component to them, giving a user profile or user experience to demonstrate how, you walk from A through Z through this application is really, really useful.
And then one more comment, or, okay.
So, I'm thinking, if I was a judge and I read like 50 of these already, it would have been helpful to have like the most powerful sentence in each paragraph, either bolded or something. So if I'm this lazy, and you happen to be the last one I read of the day, I can hit the 5 sentences that tie it all together and leaves an impression on my mind.
I'm really glad you brought up that point. So we did talk about format being flexible. That also goes for font. If there's a really important mission statement or something that's coming through, by all means, use bold, underline, italicize. Use a font that is clear and concise, but you're allowed to be creative. We're not going to put you in a little box there. So great.
So, for instance, if you follow up your landscape analysis and you move into your proposed innovation section, a really good tip is that first sentence should be your value proposition. So if you've looked at your landscape and you've said, they're slower or they're not as efficient, your next sentence in the proposed innovation section should lead with, we are faster, we are more efficient, we are, it should be that sentence that describes your MVP, or not your MVP, but your value proposition in very clear terms in one sentence right at the top of your proposed innovation section. Keep something of that route.
Yeah, you guys are great. I would say to give all yourselves a round of applause for your interaction. So yeah, I'm really, really impressed with all of this. Now, if you need a couple seconds to just like stretch in something, we're gonna transition to our speaker. I mentioned a little bit earlier, but I would love for Scott to introduce himself, talk a little bit about what we're gonna do, and we're really, really excited to have you.
And I'll pass out Post-its. How many, like?
One per person, and if there's not enough pads for each person, you can like.
So if you're part of our remote audience, you are welcome to partake. If you have some Post-its, that would be great. Otherwise, you can just see Scott doing his magic.
Cool. Hi y'all, what's up? Hey, how y'all doing? How's it going? I feel like, can we just everyone just stand up and just raise your hand? It would really help me too at a long day. Stand, if you can stand, if possible. Just give a high five to the person across from you. Some love, you have big ideas. Oh my God, I'm so glad we're okay, go ahead and sit down. So, hi, I'm so excited to be here. I have a link between Outcasts, the hip hop group, Death, and also Congress. Feels like 3 really weird words, but I think the thing that unites the 3 of them is story, and it's a part of my story. Outcasts, so does anyone know Outcasts, hip hop group? Okay, I was like, am I dating myself right now? So I used to be a music journalist at the Washington Post in DC, and I interviewed a ton of different musicians, including Outcasts. And I learned there about the power story. I was also a lobbyist, and I worked on the Hill. So I've been on both the receiving side of getting legislation influencing legislation, and I've also sort of pushed it as well. Story is a big part of that as well. And Death, I work at IDEO. Does anyone know IDEO? Design firm? Cool, a couple people. So that was one of my big projects that I just came off of, which was redesigning Death. And how do we actually create a world where people can die with dignity? And how does end of life care really look like? So story is such a big part of all of that. And what I'm gonna do today is we're gonna do a really interactive 40 minutes of that. And you're gonna walk away feeling more empowered to tell stories, not just for this big ideas competition, which is really amazing, but also just in your life. Cool? Yeah? Does that sound great? Cool? Exciting? Okay, awesome. So the first thing, it's all good. So we're gonna draw, take a Post-it, take a pen, and you're gonna have 30 seconds to draw the person across from you. 30 seconds, go. You're gonna start now, 30 seconds. You're gonna show people. So just put in your bug, your drawing, get their eyebrows, get their hair, get their jacket, get glasses, so shiny glasses, your photos. There's 20 more seconds. 20 more seconds. Alright, got 10 more seconds to do the hair. They have any jewelry on. Notice that. They're smiling. Okay, I want you to show your neighbor your beautiful drawing. Like, show them your Discord. Don't stop, everyone down, stop. Fence it down, fence it down. Show your beautiful drawing. Raise your post-it line here. Show your drawing. If you're still drawing, you need to stop. Show your drawing. Nice. Great.
It's been a while since I've done any sketching.
I'm sorry.
You can see where you are.
Amazing. Can I show this for the live stream? We've got like, that's like one of them there. Cool. So I heard in this like general area, I'm so sorry. Like there was like an apology like before you even started drawing. I don't know who that was, but actually I know who it was, but I'm not gonna name you. But how was that experience for you all? Just shout it out. What was that like?
It's fine.
Fine. Wait, what? Embarrassing. Did other people were like, oh my god, that was embarrassing? Other folks? Nerve-wracking. Yeah. Stressful. I know, it's like sometimes you have this like beautiful picture in your head and you're like, I swear it looks better than what I put on there. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts on this exercise?
It was fun.
It was fun, yeah, this is thankful. Yeah, so we actually facilitate this exercise to a lot of folks. And we always hear like very similar things. We hear, I'm so sorry, that was embarrassing, it was nerve-wracking. Except when we do it in K through 6 classes. Like, all the kids are so excited and they're so proud of everything that they've drawn. And the reason why is of this notion called creative confidence. And it's this idea that we don't actually, we feel creative, we are creative, but we're told somewhere down the line that we're not by someone, right? Or maybe we tell ourselves that. And it's actually really important in all of the storytelling advising I've ever done, and I've worked with like founders of large enterprises, I've worked with lobbyists, I've worked as a journalist. Like creativity is a huge part of creating something that's really compelling for people to understand. Stories are the fabric of what connects us. That's why I have a literal tattoo on my wrist. That's why I teach storytelling here on campus. And so creativity is actually something I want us to really step into in our creative confidence, okay? So when you're creating this proposal, try to be creative with the process and try to be creative with what it is that you're trying to share. Creativity shows up in a lot of different ways. So we've actually like 3D printed objects and buried them, and we asked kids in the UAE who are doing a project there to tell us what do we find from the future in 2050? Like we brought back these excavated materials. Like what are they? What do they do? Tell us a story of what they are. These kids tell like the most incredible stories about these futuristic goggles that transport you to another country and allow you to empathize with other kids that you don't get to connect with. I mean, it's like really remarkable. It's really innovative, right? And so, you know, innovation is like 40% of your proposal. And so it's important to think about what are the ways that you can get into a mindset that allows you to be more creative, more innovative. So I just want to share that as like a little fun thing. I want you to take about 60 seconds here to think about a story. Maybe a friend told you this, or a family told you a story, or maybe something you saw. A story that really like struck you and really resonated with you. Just think about it and write it on a piece of your Post-its. Write it on a Post-it once you have sort of like that story in your mind. So any story that really stuck with you. And as you're thinking about the story, start to think about like, why did that story stick with you? Like, what was it about it that just really resonated? Maybe about 10 more seconds. All right, so we're gonna share a couple of those ingredients that created a sticky story for you. Does anyone want to share? Don't share the story, or you can share it if it's like a couple of words. But share why you thought it was sticky. Like, what was it about it that made the story stick with you? Yep.
So I know this really tough guy, and his brother recently passed, and he was like bawling in tears. It was so sad. And it was something I was
Yeah, so it was very emotional. There was something emotional about that. Yeah, that's great. So on the other hand, yep.
So about this guy who's super, like, he founded his own startup, and he's super decisive in whatever he approaches. But then something goes awry and he leaves his own startup, and then he goes back to it because he feels that he moved away from where his heart belonged.
And why did that stick with you? What was it about it with that story in particular?
I thought it was catchy because of the way the way he behaved or reacted was something that I would describe.
Oh, cool. So it was very relatable.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Maybe like 2 other thoughts? Yeah, right here.
I several stories came to mind, but they mostly had to do with waking up with an animal, like someone woke up with like a smelling the fish on a bear's breath when they were camping. Because the bear was sniffing their face. Anyway, what was interesting about it was that it was novel. Like it was sort of, it's almost unbelievable. It had like some wonder, and it was really interesting.
I love it. It was very unexpected. It's like not the typical story I'm reading or seeing all the time. Yeah. Why don't you take us home?
For me, something that I took for granted and someone like says a complete opposite.
Yeah, so there's like a teachable moment. There's something I learned. Yeah. So couple of things. One is you don't actually need me up here teaching you about storytelling. It's kind of a facade because you already know how to tell good stories. We are story beings. We've grown up with them. We've heard them. We've learned them. What I'm going to do is just clarify the things you already know and provide a process for it. Like that's it. So trust your intuition to do a really great story. The other thing I'll say is we're moving really quickly because I want you to get into the habit of prototyping and building quickly. Like that's what we do all the time at ADIO, and it includes the way we build stories. It should not, in my opinion, I think there's a lot of different styles and ways to build stories, but I don't really resonate with the approach of like sitting in front of a computer and writing down like a 3-page proposal. Like what I need to do is like be visual and put like a frame storyboard together. Or I need to like write an outline, or I need to do something that allows me to prepare for that moment and write. Sometimes it doesn't naturally flow through me. And so what I would say is you can get to there faster if you get into the habit of prototyping and testing often. So we're going to learn about how to do that through this sort of model. And that the storytelling process feels like this. You're going to be sitting in your room or in your cafe with your team. Be like, why isn't this pre-proposal or the story that I'm writing for X, why isn't it coming together? And it's okay because it feels chaotic, but at the end, you'll get to a moment where it starts to make sense. So just trust in that. And I've been there, and I feel you, and I see you. So the first thing we're going to learn is about a story brief. And we're going to do something that's really simple. It's really just filling in this map list. So I want to tell a story about blank so that I can blank. This is so useful as a starting point if you want to get a promotion. Like they teach you this in negotiation class. If you want to fundraise, if you're running a nonprofit and you want to raise funding, if you are trying to attain love, right? Like there's a lot of personal, professional reasons why this is really important. I've used it, and it just helps you get to the brief of your story. So we're actually going to do that. The way we're going to do that, and we're not going to use this yet, is you're going to fill in this Mad Lib, and you're just going to write it on your Post-it. So again, I want to tell a story about blank so that I can blank. And I would push you or provoke you to not just think about so I can get money, like maybe there's like a partnership, possibility that you're thinking about. Maybe there is a team member you're trying to enlist into your idea. Maybe there is an exciting opportunity you're trying to go to. Like, try to expand beyond just trying to get this big idea money. It's great. That's great too, if you also want to think about that. But feel free to be flexible in what it is that you write and share. Awesome. So what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you turn to your neighbor, hopefully someone you don't know, and you're going to share your story brief, and you're going to ask for a reaction, just like a general reaction. We're going to start there, and I'll tell you when to switch. So it's going to be really quick, 20 seconds, 20 seconds. So first person will share, the person you're reading it to will give you a reaction, I'll tell you when to switch, and you'll share if you're giving a reaction. Sound good? Cool. All right, first person, decide who's sharing. Turn to your neighbor, and you're going to share your story brief.
I want to tell you a story about how blockchain could be used for financial inclusion in Colombia, so that I can use it.
Yeah, you want to tell a story about blockchains?
Are you the concept? Yes. I was like, are you for financial
I'm curious about this, but I'm kind of. Well, let's see.
We need to get kids in.
So, but you want to Colombia be.
Okay, I'm going to bring us back. We're going really quickly. It's all about prototyping.
More collective information from different organizations.
And bring us all back. There's such wonderful. So one thing I want to point out that's really amazing is that there's so much conversation because there's so much desire to share. There's so much to learn from one another. So I'm really excited. I want you all to, like, before you leave, to trade contacts with people you don't know, and form a community, learn from each other. This process of sharing even just your brief is it puts you in a vulnerable position, right? So sometimes it can feel really scary to share, but being heard is actually so nice, right? And it gives us a lot of confidence to go deeper into our story. Some of you, when asked to give a reaction, were like, oh, I'm not sure what reaction to give. And so feedback is hard. And so I'm going to give you some frameworks on how to give better feedback as well later on in the talk today. But I'm giving you a little taste. Just trust the process and follow along. So you have your brief. So you know the story you're trying to tell in a really succinct way, and you know why you're trying to tell it. So the next thing you need to think about is who it is that you're trying to tell this story to. So I was yesterday talking to someone that was a head of policy in the White House for the Obama and the Trump administration. And he said there's a difference between briefing the president and briefing a congressional member or a staffer. And there's a difference between briefing someone on my team that I'm working with, right? Like, each of those audiences have different contexts. There's different constraints, and there's different language and things that they care about. So we're actually going to do a worksheet that I have for y'all about going deeper into who the audience is that you're focusing on. And the questions I want you to think about are, who is your audience for this story that you're trying to share? What is it that they care about or value? And what part of your work would make them curious to learn more? There's also a couple other questions in this worksheet, and you can also fill that out too. It's in a single sentence. What is the big idea? Don't fill out this paragraph right here, this big box. Just leave that empty. But fill out the side here and these two boxes up top. Sound good? Cool.
And your audience isn't just the judges, it's also the people that you're trying to work with, if you're designing a solution. Your input.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, any new team members?
Yeah, so you're just gonna take a couple of minutes, and again, Francis had really great advice. You don't have to just think of your judges, think of any audience group you're trying to work with and share a story with. And again, the top two columns or rows and the right column. So if you want to clap. Give you a couple minutes and we'll play some music. Oh, can I play it from my phone? I sound like that. Hopefully that's not distracting. Hopefully it's like creative. It's like creative. Yeah. Whatever. Yeah. Partner, team member, could be a judge if you want Great would be so nice. Actually, it's fair use.
Yeah, we're not probably.
How do you make with this? A drawing?
Yeah, you can draw so who did you write down? So think about a person that's on that committee and just like draw their portrait.
Okay.
So,
In just about 30 more seconds to finish up what you got. Yeah, one way to make your audience, yeah.
Yeah.
We try to move to this section. It's okay not to do this. Okay. Yeah. Maybe jump to this question.
Okay.
Okay. All right. It's okay if you haven't filled out all of the boxes on the worksheet. It's really just an exercise to help you. I'm curious about, does anyone want to share something that they learned or thought about in a new way as they were writing this out? Like something that was like, oh wow, I didn't think about that. Or if it felt like, oh, this was like very common knowledge, I know all this stuff, that's an okay reaction too. But what was that experience like? Does anyone want to share? Someone in this, yeah.
Our audience can be composed by different actors, and they do not all have the same motivations.
Yeah, that's really great. So sometimes we have really complex audiences that have a lot of different motivations. Yeah, I think that's really great. Is there anyone else want to share? How about someone from that back table there? Yeah. Is there anything you want to share about how that experience was? About how the experience was?
Oh, yeah, I love it because some things I always think about, and then it's good to visualize it and write it down, and then while I'm trying to portray to help me next time when I see that person, then I already have what I want to say, and then the story, to tell the story.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like you're a visual learner, so that actually helped you remember who it is that you're trying to focus on. That's great. What about on that back left table? Anyone want to share just a reaction, or how was that experience for you?
It's kind of hard to organize your thoughts quickly.
Yeah.
Because there's so many things going on in your head at once that it's like, what do I put down?
Yeah, that's real.
Yeah, so it kind of helps you, it forces you actually to get your thoughts organized and get them down, be concise and so don't make your point.
Yeah, did other folks feel like at times it was really hard? Yeah, it is like that even for like really seasoned founders and folks that are storytellers or designers. The reason why we actually do this is for a couple of reasons. One is it helps us understand what gaps we have in our knowledge. So anytime you're making an assumption about someone that you're trying to reach with your message, anyone in your audience, if you're like, I think this is what motivates them, or I think this is like what they would find curious, that's probably a sign that there's a possibility to learn more about that audience and what they care about and immerse yourself in that relationship a little bit more. The other thing is we sometimes have a lot of different audiences actually, or a lot of different goals, or a lot of different directions we want to take our ideas. And that's really great, especially in the early stage of a venture. But at a point, you need to start making decisions and start focusing and start prioritizing, right? And we don't have like infinite time or infinite potential. I mean, we have infinite potential, but we don't have infinite energy, right? So sometimes we get tired, we sleep, we have to do other things in life. And so we can't spend our time trying to reach all of the audiences in the world, right? So we have to start prioritizing what's most strategic for us and who is it that we should reach out to. I think the other thing that is helpful is this idea about writing your idea in a single sentence. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that. At IDEO, we call it the big idea. So it's this idea that not only do we have to make our stories compelling and emotional and all of these other things that make it stick, but it needs to be really clear. And your audience, whoever it is that you're reaching out to, needs to fully understand your idea the first time you explain it. And if they need to reread things, then it's probably not really clear. So in the pre-proposal example, I would say like there were some clarity issues. Like I wasn't fully following certain parts of the proposal. I think some other things around like viability and like how do we know that people are actually going to use the pen, but like there's other questions that came up. But the biggest thing that stood out for me when I was reading it was like, there's certain parts where I'm getting lost. And so what you want to make sure, whether you're writing this 3-page proposal or you're doing any kind of storytelling, you need to make sure that what it is you're saying is clear. And the way that I push people to do this is I ask them a simple question. And the question is, how would you explain your idea to an average 12-year-old in your country? And it's It sounds really easy, but you would be really surprised. A lot of organizations cannot do this well. A lot of ideas can't do this well. So we're gonna have you step into this challenging question and try to answer it. You should be able to fit it all in a single Post-it or on that sort of that second row on the worksheet. But you're gonna think about what is the sentence that you would share that clearly explains your idea to a 12-year-old. So that means you can't use like technical language, really, like can't really use jargon. You really have to use clear language to get your idea across. So let's take about a minute to write down one sentence that helps you explain your idea. And feel free to come up with a number of sentences, like refine if like that first sentence didn't work, like tear that Post-it off and try it again.
This is a great start on that 50-word summary, then 10 to the web.
And if you're feeling yourself trying to perfect the sentence, try to stop those impulses and urges and really just try to get words onto the paper. And it's okay to write it a couple of times. I'm gonna give you about 20 seconds here. If you've already written it once, you can try getting another Post-it, writing it in a different way. Great. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna share with our partner what our sentence is, but this time, instead of just asking like, what is your reaction? I want you to ask a pointed question for feedback. And the question is gonna be, was that clear to you? And if it wasn't, tell me about what wasn't clear about it. Like point out the part of the sentence that wasn't clear. Sound good? So you're gonna share your sentence, and you're gonna ask for feedback. And you're gonna say, was my idea clear? If it wasn't, what part of it wasn't clear? Okay? So the first person can share your sentence and then ask for feedback.
Yeah, I don't have this down to one sentence, but I wanna change the way that people in general, but starting with the UC Berkeley campus, deals with organic waste. There's a lot of opportunity to provide revenue stream out of organic waste. Yeah. Okay. And then there's a few different ways to do that, and then like the first step is to figure out which is the best way. But yeah, like there's some larvae that will reduce the yeah, like there's yeah. Okay.
If you haven't switched yet, you can switch to sharing their sentence and again ask for feedback. What was clear or what wasn't clear?
So,
switch, yeah. You guys switch.
what is the best way to collect information in a database to improve financial inclusion? clear.
What's the financial inclusion in this?
Financial inclusion means that the people who have access to banking, loans, for example, banking, credit, through this technology to be
Oh, so you wanna use a technological approach to assess the best way to bring improve financial
Okay,
literacy.
cool.
Maybe.
So we're gonna stop. Put your pens down. Can someone share how that experience was? Like, was there something that you learned through that exercise? Something that maybe your partner said, or something you realized that you were doing the exercise that anyone wants to share? On this table. Yeah.
I'd just like to say a very good question that she ended up asking me was, what did you interpret my sentence as?
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, so I think that's such a great way to start leading into asking for feedback. And a lot of times when folks are sharing their stories or their proposals, they're kind of just like, all right, so what did you think? Like, what's your thoughts on that? Versus like having really pointed questions, like how did you interpret that? Like, what wasn't clear about that? Like, what was there a word that hung you up? Can you tell me more? Point that out to me. So I think that's really great. Like such a great sort of emphasis on the way we ask for feedback. It's awesome. About someone on this table here. You want to share how that experience was?
I asked him just more broadly, like what he meant by centers for learning.
Okay, yeah.
Go more into that.
So the word centers for learning, it was like hard for you to picture.
What that meant. The word schools in it, so they look more learning.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. So sometimes we as like the story authors have an idea, a clear idea of what it is we're trying to say, but when we tell it to someone, they're kind of not getting that same picture. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, we could share.
Yeah, sure.
We're on the same team though.
Oh, great. No worries.
So she had some stuff here that was English is your second language.
Yes.
Yeah, but still very good English. But she used some bigger words than I usually use. So things she put in here were things like navigate the streets, and I said like help them go to Russia. So like I mean, yes, we're gonna help blind people navigate the streets, but I don't just not even like a 5-year-old, but we're very smart.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, we're just gonna help them know what's going on, so that they can navigate. So that they can live a better life.
Right. Yeah, that's really interesting. When you start to use like Orwellian, like simple language, it starts to make my mind race. It's not about me being on a city street, but I imagine like a kid like, you know, in a pasture, like and trying to understand like his surroundings in a building, like his friends, like it starts to expand the possibilities, which makes it really exciting. It's really great. Any other thoughts that folks want to share? I'll stop pointing at people because that can be really traumatic, and I apologize. But any other thoughts? Yeah.
Yeah, just one tip. Share your big ideas proposal with people you live with, other people on campus who know nothing about your project or from a totally different discipline. You know, they might pick up on something that everyone in your mechanical engineering group of friends like understands, but someone outside of that might not. So
yes,
just ask for feedback from lots of different people.
Yeah, that's actually going to be your
not
homework. Yeah, your homework is going to do that. There's a slide at the end that asks you to do that, to pick 3 very different people. I often have partners that I work with, like sort of partners that I work with at IDEA, do what's called the bar test. So they're all over 21, so I have them go to the bar and I have them pitch their idea to just a stranger that's in the bar and try to get their reaction. It's kind of like an awkward thing to do at first, but I think folks are actually really curious and they're like, wow, this is like not a typical thing people ask at the bar. That's really fascinating. Sure, I'll like buy into this. And they get a lot of inspiration actually. They get some really great insights that they don't get from folks that have been doing this work for 10, 20 years. The reason is because that person is offering such a fresh perspective. And so that's really helpful. And so, yeah, just thinking about different people and what they potentially offer to you when you get feedback is great. And using the great advice of, what was your name? Christina, actually asking for pointed advice, thinking about the questions. So this is in the book called Made to Stick. It's a really great book about storytelling. And I added an extra S, but they write about the success motto. in this book. And so it's about the best stories when they've analyzed it have these things in common. They're really simple. They have moments where there's a lot of unexpected moments. It's concrete. It is credible, so it feels like the folks that are sharing this information, they feel like it's coming from a credible source. It's emotional. I think someone had said that was a reason why it stuck with them. And I added the other aspect, which is shareable, because I think in this digital world, if you have a story that's shareable and it can catch on, I think that's a really great thing to have. But if you have these components in your story, if you look through your proposal and you ask yourself, was it simple? Was there a moment that was unexpected? Was it concrete? Was it credible? Or you ask others when you're trying to get feedback from a roommate or you're going to the bar to try that bar test, you can ask questions by adding was it blank, and just putting that word in the blank. So I find that super helpful whenever you're creating any kind of story. And then feedback being like the most critical part of the story process, of a proposal process. I totally want you all to do this. Find people that are really diverse who you don't often interact with and push yourself to ask for feedback and have them read your proposal. And there's another sheet that we won't fill out today, but I just want to give it to you as sort of a resource. But when you talk to one of these individuals and you ask them for feedback about your pre-proposal, let's say as an example, I want you to think about the types of questions that you'd like to ask them. And then on the worksheet, there are boxes that say, I like, I wish, and I wonder. And just fill in the feedback that you've received from that person so that you can capture it somewhere. There's also a big box next to it that says note-taking. So if you pair up with someone in this classroom or you pair up with a project team member, you can share it with each other and you can both have an opportunity to give feedback. But I wanted to give this as a resource and also sort of really encourage you to do this because that's where all the magic happens. At every level of storytelling, from writing a paper at your university to the highest stake types of stories that impact security or impact policy or impact things that are really large scale, or you're trying to get large sums of funding, for instance. It really comes down to feedback, particularly with the audience that you're trying to pitch to, right? So quickly, we talked about the different formula, what the formula of your story is. So there's a story brief. So I want to tell a story about blank in order to blank. Learning about the audience, who it is that you're actually trying to reach out to or share the story with, what motivates them, what do they need, what are the gaps, what are the things that I can do to learn more about them and not operate on assumptions, and then what is the big idea? And then you want to start to flesh out the story details. And so on that first worksheet, there's a box that says, write up why your idea is innovative in a single paragraph. But you can start to fill in some of the details of your 3-page proposal once you've done the first 3 pieces. It happens in that order because it helps you sort of frame the rest of the pieces. And then you start to test. You get out there and you put your proposal, you put your story in front of as many people as possible, and you start to get that feedback. I'm not going to have you do this just because of time, but what I was going to have you do is turn to your neighbor and share your idea beyond just a simple sentence, talk it through with your partner, and then to ask for pointed feedback. What was clear about that? Was it compelling? Were there things you wanted to learn more about? Oh, I miss talking about my team. Cool, good note. It's just helpful to do it in partnership with another person. And this is the last activity that I'll have you all do. I think this is a really great one. So you just want to think of 3 peers. I want you to think of one person in this room that you don't know. I think that's going to be really important for you. And if you don't know their name or don't have their contact information, and let it be an opt-in, consent, you don't have to share your contact information with anyone you don't want to. But it is mutually you want to do this and step into this. Try to find a person that you don't know that you can work on some feedback and testing with. And then think of 2 other individuals that you know in your life. And maybe as you think about those 3, try to picture what makes them so different where the feedback that I'm gonna get from them is gonna offer me something new or something unique. Okay. Yep.
If I'm approaching somebody randomly to ask them for feedback that's like outside of my normal bubble, how would you phrase that?
Yeah, so that's what's called an intercept. So there's a lot, first of all, like take a step back and say, you can also get a lot of value from the people you know or are an acquaintance to. And I would also think about who are folks that people might know. So like Francis, for instance, right, who has a connection to a lot of different mentors and folks that want to help you. I would start there, but if you think it's important to get the everyday person's response, and doing an intercept might be the way to do it. So what you would do is go up to someone and say like, hi, here's my name, I'm applying for this big ideas competition. I would love to talk to you for like 5 minutes or 3 minutes, however much time you need. Would you be okay with doing that? And then always just like letting them know like how their information is going to be used, like what you're using it for, who you are, and being really honest about that. And some people might say like, no, I'm not interested, I don't have time, and just like really respecting that. And some people might say, yeah, sure, I have 5 minutes to help you with that. And then, respecting their time after they've shared their feedback and saying like, thank you so much, I really appreciate your time, I know you're busy, you don't really know me, but this is going to help, this really great idea that I have. So I really appreciate that. Obviously, like things like, just do that safely, do that wisely, do that in appropriate ways. Yeah, we're all adults. Yeah.
What's your thoughts on like emotional vampires? Like people who are just like naysayers, they don't think it's possible.
That's true. Yeah, that's really great. So I think there's a difference between someone that is a provocateur, like someone that maybe has like a deep commitment to excellence in the craft, and they are saying things that feel really negative, but they're actually their hope is to help you grow. And I think there's folks that just aren't feeling it and don't want to be collaborative and don't want to support you. And I think it's important to discern like who this person is and what it is that they're trying to do, like what they're motivated by, like what is it, why is that coming from this person when we're receiving this? And I would ask about an open question, and especially why. We have this tool called laddering why that I use a lot. It's just asking why 5 times. And so I'd be like, wow, that's like really interesting. Like, why do you think that? Oh, that's interesting. So what I'm hearing is a little bit of this, but why do you think that's important? And as you start to go deeper and deeper, you'll probably start to understand like these more fundamental things and realize like, wow, he's actually really afraid of this idea and has some fears about it because he was affected in a negative way about a similar innovation that exists in the space. I don't know, I'm just like saying an example, but there's sometimes something that's much more core to why someone is giving you this negativity. That might actually be interesting to surface so you can respond to it. That's very good. Yeah, totally. And I think being open and honest and saying like, we're at an early stage, we're just really trying to grow this. We would really appreciate your expertise and you leaning in to support us in our journey and our growth. Love your feedback. Here are the questions I have, it's hit or miss. Most of the time, people are good and they want to support you, I would say. Any other questions or any thoughts about some of the folks that they're thinking of that they want to test this with? Did someone have an idea of like someone they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited, I forgot about this person, I really want to ask this person? Or like, are folks feeling inspired to do this? Like, does it feel, okay, cool, yeah, great. I'm gonna hold you to, I'm gonna like camp out on campus, and I'm gonna find you, I'm gonna be like, did you do it? 43 people, what did you learn? I won't actually do that. Cool, so that's the components of a good story. What turns good to great, just to leave you with this, is making sure that's clear, making sure that's compelling. If you have those 2 aspects, you're really mapping it to the audience, it's gonna be successful. And again, it's a cycle. So you're gonna share your story, get feedback, and then you're gonna refine your story. And then you're gonna, again, share that new story, get feedback, refine your story. This is very simple. It's a very simple process, but a lot of times people do this cycle maybe once, and they feel like they're totally good, and they submit it. But I would encourage you, again, in the nature and spirit of prototyping and getting it out to as many people as possible, really challenge yourself to find different perspectives. And I think, 3 quick tips, like don't worry about it being perfect. After collecting feedback, take a step back and try to understand like what was useful for you. So in that case of emotional vampire, like making sure that the feedback is actually resonating and is actionable, and refine your story as much as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're all here for that last part, so, thank you so much.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
amazing.
Awesome, thanks y'all.
So I know we ended a little bit later, but it was